Welcome back to the Sports Roundtable State News Podcast. I'm here covering all things MSU sports, and if you're wondering why the host looks a little different, it's because it is. My name is Jacob Smith. It's my first time hosting the Sports Roundtable for the first time, and I'm joined by my guest,
Luke Joseph.
Luke Joseph is a sports general assignment reporter here at the State News. Basically, today we're just going to be going over a lot of what's been going on in MSU sports recently. I mean, it's hard to kind of ignore what's been going on with sports as of late at MSU.
Yeah, I mean, every team pretty much has just been doing really well. Obviously, we'll get into the first thing, which is men's basketball. They just, last night, I believe, they just completely took over against Minnesota. I think once Trey Holloman hit like those back-to-back three-pointers, MSU just kind of pulled away.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I was there for that game, and seeing Trey Holloman hit those three in a row, that was the loudest I probably can recall the Breslin, or one of the loudest moments I can recall the Breslin being all year. It was real electric factory, but I think what was good for Michigan State in this win is they started slow. It's hard to ignore that the offense was not really there in the first half.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think in the beginning of games, there's always going to be like something that just happened. Like a team is just going to start out slow, but it's not about how you start. It's all about how you finish.
Most definitely.
But just seeing, all those guys just getting so active, it's not like Jaden Akins didn't have. I don't think he played the greatest game, or am I confusing that with?
We can get into that a little bit later. We had Rutgers on Saturday where he shot 3-15, but last night he shot 4 of 9, still a little bit slow. I think 2 of 5 from 3, so it still took him a little bit to get going. But Akins really did kind of bounce back just a little bit. He still had 10 points, knocked him down a little bit.
Yeah, Xavier Booker looked a lot more aggressive, and then we saw Carson Cooper just being a monster down low.
Yeah, I think the Carson Cooper development's been actually a little bit interesting because obviously his scoring has never been his best asset of his game. But I think what's been more underrated this season, especially for MSU, and a reason why they're winning is because of the rebounding, the defense. He was putting his hands up. He was playing straight basketball. He's kind of doing the dirty work for you.
Yeah, he was definitely, he made his presence known, just being, that just monster in the paint, just being that defensive presence. It's been really great to see because MSU hasn't had that in quite a bit. We had, Madi Sissoko, and, we all love him, but he just wasn't, that defensive anchor. We haven't had that since Xavier Tillman was here.
I agree.
So it's been good to see.
Yeah, I think the rotation of the bigs, too. I mean, just because we're talking about Carson Cooper, who's second, arguably third string off the bench.
Exactly.
We have Simon Zapala and Jackson Kohler in the starting lineup.
Yeah.
Xavier Booker, you can play with cards with him a little bit. He may go power forward, but you can bring him in as a big presence.
You can.
And I think that's the reason why MSU has succeeded so much this year is just because the rotation of those guys. You got 3 or 4 guys you can bring in at any given moment of the game, really throw them off. And it's not just like that at the center position. We have that at guard as well. We have that at forward as well. We're at 10, 11 deep, and that's why I think this team is so scary.
Yeah, it's like we don't have like that, Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper or, just like that superstar. We just have like a ton of, guys who know their roles, and this team goes 10 deep, arguably, maybe even 11 deep. I won't push it there, but at least 10 deep. Everybody just knowing their roles. It's if one guy has an off night, it's just a guarantee that somebody else will have, like the biggest game of their career so far.
Yeah, and that's why I love it. And I think the biggest thing about the team so far this year is Tom Izzo loves this style of play. We've known, and he's been accustomed to this for years now. That's why he's so successful. You'll see him sub 3 guys coming in at the 17-minute mark of the first half. Like he's not playing around. He's going to rotate these guys very often, which is why I think this has been such a success this season. This is the basketball that he wants to play. He wants to play fast. Jeremy Fears, Trey Holloman, they're all going to push the ball down the court. Those shots are going to fall, especially for Akins coming around whenever they're starting to heat up. But this team is fun.
And when they do make like those big substitutions, taking 3 guys out, it's like they don't really skip a beat. It's like sometimes when you bring in, new guys, they, haven't even played yet, so it's like they got to get loose a little bit. But it's like these guys are just ready to roll. Like they don't even they, like I said, they just don't skip a beat.
That's what I'm saying. I know it's crazy. In Minnesota, they were not just walk in the park yesterday. They came into the game winning 3 straight.
They came to play.
They got a win over Michigan as well recently.
Yeah.
Like they're a legit team. I know we beat them twice, one at the Barn, one here at the Breslin. But the Big Ten, that's why I think the biggest thing with the Big Ten basketball is like you look at any conference across the country. The Big Ten has got some of the purest basketball out there.
Yeah.
And that's why the crowd that's always like, oh, you're supposed to win. You're supposed to beat Minnesota twice. Like, no game in the Big Ten is an easy game. We've seen every single team at the top slip up. Illinois now has 5 losses. Purdue is number 10, but they've had a few bad losses. Michigan, we just saw go down to Minnesota. So that's why I think what MSU is doing at 9-0 in the conference, 18-2 overall, that's not easy.
It's almost like the Big Ten is just kind of like this giant bar fight. You know, it's when you leave like an opponent's arena and you come out with a win, you're going to come out with a few black eyes and maybe even like a broken bone. Mm-hmm. But it's like you're coming out of that game knowing that you had to fight for it. You know, even if you're going up against like a team that's 0-7 in the Big Ten and has like a below 500 record, you're always going to come out of it with some type of injury almost.
Yeah, and if
that makes any sense.
I know exactly what you mean. That's what I'm kind of saying. It's like nothing's easy, nothing's guaranteed in the Big Ten, but we're still finding ways to win. Michigan State, that is, and they're, like I said, they're 18-2 now, 9-0 in the Big Ten play. They also last Saturday had a win over Rutgers. That was 81-74, a little bit close, kind of close for liking, but I feel like we kind of figured, even though Rutgers didn't have Dylan Harper for the majority of the game, that game would be a little bit close, almost like trap game feel, just because Ace Bailey's going to shoot at a high volume, knock down some of those tougher shots for them, but MSU did still end up with the win.
I mean, Rutgers, they have, arguably the best player or best freshman in college basketball right now with Dylan Harper, who's going to be either 1 or 2 in the NBA draft. Ace Bailey, who is just like the second version of Brandon Miller or even Kevin Durant light. His ability to, make shots is just insane.
From anywhere in the court, yeah.
Like it's just nuts. And Izzo doesn't have like the greatest record at Madison Square Garden. I believe last time I checked, it was like 1-3 or 1-4 before that game.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that it was against Rutgers, it definitely was a challenge. It definitely was a challenge.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore. The crowd was pretty much all red there, and you did hear "Go Green" chants at the end when we were closing that one out. But like you said, there was no easy fate.
Yeah.
Like we've been saying this whole episode, any win in the Big Ten is not easy, but the fact that they were still able to come out on top was very, very, very nice, especially with Jay Nakin shooting 3-15, as we mentioned a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a great win overall. I believe Jace Richardson, he came off the bench and he looked like the best freshman on the court.
Yeah, he had 20 points.
And it's just insane how good he's been playing coming off the bench. Just being that plug and play guy. Just knowing his role, and there's even talks that he could potentially be a first-round pick in the draft.
Yeah, the way he's playing, it's no surprise.
I don't even think Izzo or himself even thought that would have been a possibility, but here we are.
Yeah, exactly. And it obviously would benefit him to kind of test his waters a little bit, see how the NBA is looking past this season, but also have the ability to still come back. But nevertheless, he is letting it up from anywhere on the court. His field goal percentage is up there above 50%. He's hitting down shots that are not easy at a very high rate, which I think is very impressive. And also to mention, Cohen Carr had 14 on 5-of-5 shooting against Rutgers that day, which his development has also been pretty significant outside of the crazy dunks.
I mean, we saw him, shoot a couple threes. He made a couple threes throughout the season. And I think he's just building. It's like that freshman class from last year. They're just building that confidence to be like, be able to play more. It seems like they're having a lot more fun than last year. Obviously, winning helps with that. But, Jeremy Fears, he's looking like the floor general. Xavier Booker just looks like has a lot more confidence. In the beginning of the year, he was starting at the 4 spot, and then a couple games in, he was moved to the bench. But even then, it's like it's not like, he's been like upset with his role. It's like he's almost like embraced it.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing on a final touch with the basketball team is everybody on this team is going to embrace the role no matter what. You got a culture built that if you put Jaden Akins on the bench and he was coming off the bench for a game, like he wouldn't care, even though he's our senior leader. He's been here for 4 years.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing. Everybody on this team knows what they got to do to win, knows that they're going to embrace whatever Tom Izzo tells them to do, whether it's come off the bench, whether it's start a new position, that kind of thing. That's just why it's been so impressive. And to your note, the last time that MSU started 18-2 was that 2018-19 season where we saw some of the best team chemistry in recent MSU basketball history. So,
I mean, you know, anything can happen in March Madness. I mean, it's not even February yet, and we're already talking about March Madness. But, you know, anything can happen.
Yeah,
so
definitely. And
nobody thought we would beat that Duke team with Zion Williams and R.J. Barrett, and we beat them. So who knows?
Yeah, this team could go far. They have the pieces to do it, as we've mentioned. But looking ahead, it does get a little bit tougher. Their February is pretty loaded, 3 ranked games on the schedule. But also, I think to note, we have a West Coast trip coming up with USC and UCLA back-to-back. USC this Saturday and UCLA on Tuesday. So that might be not the hardest opponents, but just because you're traveling and jet lag and all that.
Yeah, I mean, we've never had to play USC or UCLA out in the West Coast before for Big Ten matchups. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. UCLA they're no slouch there. I know they've been a little bit, more of like a disappointing team. I think a lot of people had them. They would have been top 15, top 20 team, but it just hasn't been the case. I know that their coach caught some heat because he called out some of his players. But, you know, at the end of the day, he's still a really good coach, and they're still a very talented team, so you just can't overlook UCLA or USC for that matter.
Yeah, then that's the nature of college basketball, as we've been saying this entire time. Any game's going to be tough, and especially just because we haven't had a West Coast trip like this before, probably ever, like you said, because the Big Ten's new and it's different. But we also have Michigan coming up, Maryland coming up. That's in February as well. Indiana's on the schedule there. And to note, the last time that we did start 18-2, like I mentioned, was the 2018-19 season. We lost 3 straight games right after that. So this stretch is very, very vital. The whole stretch of February, for that matter, is going to be vital, and hopefully that Michigan State can keep coming out with some wins in some tough environments.
Yeah. I mean, nothing else to add there.
Yeah.
It's just as long as we can keep the momentum up, even if we lose a couple games, you know, it's not the end of the world, but, you know, it's just how we, you know, bounce back from those losses that is going to impact the way that we win.
Fair point. For our next segment, we're going to stay on the hardwood a little bit, and we're going to move to women's basketball. They are up to number 16 this week in the AP poll. Been playing great. 3 straight wins this week over Illinois on Sunday, Wednesday at Penn State, and a very, very big statement win, 88-58 over number 24 Michigan at home, which was a game that was 33-29 at halftime.
That game was just fun to watch. I mean, you know, obviously blowing out Michigan, you know, at home, that was just an amazing sight to see. You know, give credit to Michigan. They kept it close in the first half, but at the end of the day, the Spartans just pulled away, and we were just the better team.
They showed that for sure. And the energy in the Breslin was some of the best it's been in a very long time for women's basketball. But I think to note, one of the most significant performances this week was Taryn Hallock, averaging 13.8 points now in the year. But some of her performances this week were really, really eye-opening. She had 25, 2 and 4 against Michigan in that game last week. She also had 17 points against Penn State and 26 points and 4 steals against Illinois. I mean, she wasn't messing around. She was on fire.
She definitely wasn't. You know, everybody, it's almost like the men's team almost. Everybody just kind of knows their roles. But in this case, you know, there were definitely some more high scorers. You know, Haylock had 25. You know, Van Sluten coming off the bench had 18. You know, Julia had 18 as well. And then Simmons had 11. And then Julia also had 13 rebounds to go along with it, so another double-double for her. You know, it was just great to see that it seemed like everybody was getting involved, you know. Nyla Hampton coming off the bench as well, just being like that floor general off the bench. You know, she's played under Robin Freilich at Bowling Green. You know, so she obviously knows the system very well, and it's just great to see the women's team beating an arch rival like Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, it runs in the school's veins, in the blood, dare I say. But I do like your point. It does. This team does remind me a little bit of the men's team in the fact that they'll play deep into their bench and they'll still come around. They'll still hang around. This was a ranked game, by the way. Michigan 24 in the country, so it's not an opponent to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And I think that the stats are showing up as well everywhere across the board. You've got, like I said, Taryn Hill getting 4 steals, and then we're also getting boards across the way. Like, we're scoring 88 points in the game. We're kind of running around, just causing havoc. And I think some of those transfers that have come in have really, really provided an instant impact.
Yeah, I mean, Nyla Hampton had five assists, and MSU as a whole had 23 assists, and Michigan only had 8 assists. We almost tripled their assist totals, and I think that's one of the great things that Hampton has brought over to this team is just the ability to move the ball, the ability to distribute and kind of just lead the team, just calling plays and doing whatever, just being that floor general. Last year we didn't really have that from what I noticed, and it's just great to see that she's stepped up in such a big way, even coming off the bench.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Dee Dee Hannigan's departure last year was a little bit shocking at first because she was a great scorer.
Yeah.
She could obviously play the point guard position, but she wasn't going to go around and kind of dish the ball as much as Nyla Hampton is. And I think that's what's kind of been so impressive. Like you said, coming off the bench, providing that instant impact for the team, swinging the ball, getting better looks. We're not having to rely as much on isolation ball as much as we do with Dee Dee, but all respect to her as she's thriving in her new role. Yeah. But I think Nyla Hampton's impact has really gone.
And it seems like everybody's getting a lot more involved with the game. It's not like the ball is stuck in one player's hands. We love Dee Dee a lot. Like, we're not throwing like shade or whatnot, but it just seems like the ball is getting passed around a lot more and not just sticking to one person's hands.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely best for the team as well. And I think some important statistics go along with that. Not as much the assists, but the defensive statistics for this team have kind of been unreal as of late. As of January 27th, across the country, we have 5 statistics for women's basketball in the top 15. That would be 13.3 steals per game, which is 7th in the country, 24.25 turnovers forced per game, which that is like absurd. 24 turnovers, pushing 25 turnovers forced per game. That obviously comes in 8th in the country. What do you think about that?
That's incredible. That just shows that this team is just hungry, to play on defense. Like, they want to play on defense almost. You know what I mean? They accept the challenge of being on defense. They want to get the stops.
Yeah, I think that's crazy, and it's. To go along with the steals point, 24 of those turnovers are turning into 13.3 steals per game. So, it's not like we're just, wrecking havoc a little bit. Like, those are also going our way, turning into fast break points, opportunities, stuff like that on the other side of the court. We also have an 8.7 turnover margin, which is 11th in the country, 5.6 blocks per game, which is also 11th in the country, and 23.1 scoring margin, which is 13th in the country, which means we're not just winning games, we're winning it by a lot.
I mean, it's just crazy, man. I mean, the fact that Robin Freilich, it's in her 2nd year and she's already making MSU into, just such a great team to be, top. We are 16 in the country
16.
right now. I mean, last year I don't think we were ranked at all, and the fact that she's turned around this program is just incredible.
Yeah, and I think it even went a little bit underrated to start this season because we obviously started out undefeated for a big stretch. We didn't climb into the rankings until a few weeks into the season. And Robin Freilich has really done a good job at giving this team an identity. I think that's the most important thing because obviously Michigan State, it's a pretty well-known brand across the country in all facets of sports. But the women's basketball is a market. It's also a sport that has caught so much more attention in the last, let's say, 2-3 years, let alone in the last decade in the 2020s. So I think that in an era where women's basketball is definitely on the rise and is turning into something that people are really turning their heads more to, Robin Freilich is giving this team an identity, which is definitely important as you get more eyes and more attention drawn your way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the South Carolinas and the LSUs and all that stuff, but in the Big Ten, it's Michigan State is looking like one of those top tier programs. Obviously UCLA and USC are the two big brands that joined the Big Ten, and Juju Watkins is arguably the best player in women's college basketball right now. But it's just awesome to see that MSU has the ability to challenge those teams. It's not like we would get blown out. Like we can, maybe we could pull away with an upset win at USC or at UCLA.
That's what it feels like, especially with the energy in this team. I think to note, in February, MSU is going to have to face UCLA and USC both in that month as well. So, like women's, like men, it should be a very good matchup, like you said, especially USC with Juju Watkins. But UCLA is also number 1 in the country right now. So you don't know kind of how that's going to look, but that'll definitely be a big test.
To be the best, you got to beat the best.
It's 100% right.
So,
yeah,
I mean, those are going to be fun matchups to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely intriguing for how this team's going to look, and especially in the near future, but as we kind of progress into March. But the women's basketball team also faces off against Oregon and Northwestern this week. Oregon is frisky at 15-5, but like you said, you got to beat the best to be the best, and I think that MSU women's basketball has definitely proven that so far this season.
Definitely. So
we're going to move on to a little bit of hockey here as well. Some interesting news out of MSU hockey. They had a series over Minnesota this past weekend. Did sweep the season series as they took away wins in both those games, but the second night of that game, which was a 3-3 tie that went into a shootout, that goes down into tie in Big Ten standings. But they also had a commanding 9-3 win on the first night of the series, and Minnesota's number 4 in the country. It's no walk in the park.
That's great. I'll admit I'm not the most knowledgeable about hockey whatsoever, so I'm going to lean on you about hockey and your knowledge. But overall, I think, what are we, number 1 in the...
We're number 2 right now. Boston College is number 1. We are holding on to that number 1 spot until that Michigan series where we did drop one of those games, but we are still right up there, like I said, 23-3 with the best of them.
But, I mean, still, like, number 2 in the country, we're still arguably one of the best in the country, I think what's great about this is just the fact that, with NIL and all that stuff, everybody's kind of focusing on football, and unfortunately for us, like, our football team hasn't been all that good. But the fact that, we have basketball, men's basketball, women's basketball, hockey, gymnastics, men's tennis, all those sports that just don't get the national attention, like the national eye, we have all these other teams that we can go out and watch. It's not just football. Like, we can watch all these other teams.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, too, because most of what you're going to hear is about college football. When you think college sports, obviously college basketball is up there with March Madness, but some of these more underrated sports in terms of, like, national coverage and fan support, like hockey is one of them. I think this is definitely good for the brand, too, because as people, like, this is what's good about having national brands like Michigan State. I mean, Boston College is a highly recognizable school. A lot of the Big Ten, Michigan, Ohio State, they're all in the hockey rankings as well. As you get some of these more national brands into the rankings, I think it's definitely good for the sports like hockey and stuff like that hopefully draw a little bit more attention, because college hockey's fun. I don't know if you've ever been to a game at Munn, but it is electric.
I've been to a couple. I went with family members who've come down here. They know a lot more about hockey than I do, so they kind of just tell me what's happening. I'll just follow the puck and just hope that maybe somebody gets into a little bit of a fight with another player. That's it's kind of like you're just kind of waiting for the fight. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
No, I know what you mean. And for the average viewer, like I don't mean to call you anything less than that, but I think that's kind of what hockey is right
the
now.
Average viewer.
Yeah. So like that's kind of what hockey is, but I think as it gets more recognition, especially in college hockey with a lot of what's going on right now at MSU, I think it is very nice to kind of highlight some of those perspectives.
I mean, my brother and my dad, they're big hockey fans, and I'll never forget this. My dad texted me that MSU had a game on ESPN Plus, and he texted it to me to watch it. I was just like, wow, I didn't realize that like MSU or any college hockey would be like on ESPN Plus. Like that was crazy to me.
It's a big deal, yeah.
Just it's the fact that, like, as we mentioned before, like just that national spotlight just being on like these other sports, it's just steadily growing at this point, because maybe soon college hockey, it won't be on ESPN Plus. You can just watch it straight on your TV.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we've had a few games on Big Ten Network, like not even Big Ten Plus, but Big Ten Network. There's been a few college hockey games for Michigan State and also the Big Ten on that actual network where you get a lot of basketball coverage and other sports and stuff like that. So to your point, I think it is very nice to finally be recognized for some of these things and get sports that don't get as much credit, like hockey, which is definitely on the rise, or even tennis, and like you were just like all those other sports you were saying as well. But to give a little bit of a hockey recap, because this was a pretty big week and weekend in Michigan State hockey, like I mentioned, that series sweep over Minnesota that was also completes the season sweep, so we have taken care of business against them twice. That is a pretty statement win. Hopefully push back towards that number 1 ranking spot pretty soon, but MSU now holds a 5-point lead on the Big Ten standings. They sit atop the standing with 37 points. Minnesota's right behind with 32. So that's good that we have the tiebreaker. We took care of them 2 times this year, like I mentioned, 4 total. And then this upcoming week, we got Ohio State Thursday and Friday series against them. Ohio State's number 11 in the country. They are also 3rd in the Big Ten standings. So it does get a little bit rough there. But Michigan State's taking care of business all year long. Michigan's in the rankings, like I mentioned, and we've had to face Boston College. We take some games over them, so we have plenty of experience against ranked opponents. But I think some of the most notable news that came out of MSU hockey this week, and honestly, I think it was yesterday or it might have been Monday, but Red Savage is shut down for the season with an upper body injury. That is one of the most impactful players on MSU's hockey's roster. I know you mentioned you don't know too much about that, so don't feel like you need to comment or anything. But
I mean, it's anytime somebody goes down with an injury like that, it's just a devastating loss. But out for the season, I'm interested to see how we adjust to that injury, because he's a big time player.
Like you said, and like I mentioned, he is one of the most important teams on this roster, just about impact and true impact on the game of hockey. He had missed 3 games in the previous 10 days, so it's kind of trending that way. But Coach Adam Nightingale, did announce this week in a press conference that he is going to be shut down for the season. That includes the playoffs and the Big Ten playoffs, whatever. So like we are going to be obviously in that territory. So not having him in the regular season is one thing. Not having him in the playoffs is kind of a completely different thing. But luckily for Savage, his career is not going to be over. It's not like he does not have a promising pro career ahead of him. He is signed to the Detroit Red Wings. He was drafted by them in 2021, so he will be playing some professional hockey next year, whether it's in Grand Rapids with the Griffiths or probably won't be with the Red Wings next year, but he has a bright future ahead of him. Just really unfortunate for the moment right now. But that's kind of the rundown with hockey. We're going to move into our last segment of the show with a few other notable MSU sports happenings as we've been kind of covering them going around for this last week. So we have 6 teams now that are in the top 25 in their respective sports. We've mentioned MSU basketball. We've mentioned MSU women's basketball. We've got MSU men's tennis, who is up to 16 as well in this week's AP poll. MSU women's gymnastics is number 5. They were number 4 last week, had a little bit of a slippage in the rankings, but they are still at number 5. MSU women's golf is now in there. And is that 5, or did I get them all?
Men's and women's basketball, hockey, golf,
gymnastics, tennis.
Yes.
So 6 teams are now up there.
That's crazy.
It's very respectable for the brand.
Yeah, I mean, like we said before, we're not like we don't need to rely on football. Obviously, football is the biggest moneymaker, but we're not stuck with only watching football. We got other sports to watch.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's very exciting, and MSU men's tennis has been one of those teams that's a little bit under the radar sports coverage wise, but they are no joke. Yeah, Ozan Barris is one of the top college tennis players there is. He went to the national finals last year and was the runner-up.
Yeah.
16 this week's AP poll. They're 4-1 overall. Strong start to their season. They had that opening series win against Kentucky a few weekends ago. That was really significant. Kentucky was ranked in that game. It was an upset, but they've continued that string. They've had a 5-2 win over Vanderbilt, 6-1 win over Western Michigan, and a 4-0 win over Liberty. Those are 3 very commanding wins. They did drop one series, 4-1 to TCU, but TCU is also number 2 in the country, but still, nevertheless, a very, very strong start for MSU men's tennis.
Yeah, I mean, you said Barris is one of the top players in the country. He was the runner-up for, I forget which tournament it was, but it was in or at Baylor.
I think the national champion.
Yeah, the national champ. He was the runner-up for that.
In singles, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy, you know, just watching all these guys play tennis. I covered some of like the women's games. I haven't covered any of the men's games. I would actually like to do that. But even then, covering the women's games, you know, that was those matches were pretty interesting to watch. You know, so it's just great seeing, you know, now the men's tennis team is number 16 in the country. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I've spent some of my days covering MSU, both women's and men's tennis, back when I was a sports reporter, and the pace on those guys, like it feels like you're literally watching like Rafael Nadal versus Novak, like right there.
Just the college version.
Yeah, so yeah, obviously like the light version or like the discounted version, but like the pace that they play, it's legit, and it's very good practice, obviously, as they try to pursue their own pro careers as well, but it's not to mess around with. Tennis athletes, do not sleep on them because they are very, very good at their sport.
Yeah.
We'll also mention, like we said, MSU women's gymnastics is now number 5 in the overall rankings/standings with a 196.950 average score. They just had a win this past week. They had a win over number 14 Ohio State on January 24th, and Gabby Stevens, one of the stars, seniors for the MSU team, 39.375 victory. She was kind of really just taking command there against Ohio State. They captured a share of each event title, so they pretty much swept the floor in all events. And upcoming this week, they have a top 10 matchup against number 6 UCLA, but number 5 in the country. They're looking great.
They've been really fun to cover. I covered the matchup against Michigan at the Breslin Center. That was really cool. Seeing everybody, just like all the fans in there, is the first time that they ever had a gymnastics event in the Breslin Center, and to have it against the in-state rival of Michigan, who was ranked, I believe, 20th at the time. I don't know what rank they are now, but they're still a really good team. And the way that they just look completely dominant, you know, just whether it was on, you know, the floor, the vault, the bars, or the beam, you know, they just looked like they looked like the best team in the country.
Yeah.
Like they're just so good.
Yeah, I mean, good teams win, great teams dominate, and I think that's what a testament to what MSU women's gymnastics has done this season. Obviously, they got some tough foes to kind of overclimb. LSU's up there in the rankings, and like there's some teams that just have a lot of more national recognition. Like LSU is one of those teams that does have a lot of that national recognition. So gymnastics is nothing to mess around with, but like you said, having a game, like even having a match in the Breslin, like that's never been done before. That's something that's really, really crazy to even think about. And I do think it's good for the school as well. Not even just like a gymnastics national brand kind of thing. I think that for Michigan State in general, like starting to have some of these events where people, fans, kids, like young fans that may only know about football, basketball, are starting to get their opportunity to come around to some of these other events. We've had volleyball games at the Breslin before. I think this is probably the best for the school.
It's such a good thing for the sport, because then it's like, you know, everybody knows like the Breslin Center, and just having an event like that, it was just really special to see. Like while I was covering, I don't think I saw one empty chair. Like that's crazy to me.
Yeah. That's unreal.
That's unreal.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just a testament to how good this gymnastics team is. We won the Big Ten, you know, last year, and, you know, just obviously like the history of it, of like the past 10 years, you know, it's the way that they've overcome that, and just, you know, now we're a top 5 team in the country. Like that's incredible.
Yeah.
Like that's insane.
Yeah, they've always drawn crowds too at the Jennison Fieldhouse, and you always knew that there was going to be that support around them. But as obviously now that they're as good as they are and number 5 in the country, the support does come in a little bit more. But it's so much fun to watch. If you haven't gotten to a gymnastics game, which I could say myself, I probably need to get out there and watch.
You need to get out there.
Yeah.
It's incredible to watch.
Yeah, it's
like it might be better than some of the football games that I've been to.
I wouldn't doubt you on that, because especially this past season.
Yeah, especially this past season.
Yeah, I know, but it's just like you say, like the athleticism on those girls is really something that you can't even comprehend in your mind. Like the unbelievable balance they display on the beam and some of those jumps they make, especially swinging on the poles, all that. Like it is, truly something.
It's kind of interesting. A lot of people like, what's the hardest sport to play? Some people mention baseball because it's like people throwing 100-mile-an-hour pitches. I don't think anyone could do what people in gymnastics can do.
Not a chance.
I think if you walk down the street and just ask somebody, do you think you could hit a baseball versus do a flip? I think they would say I could hit 99 out of 100 baseballs versus doing one flip.
Complete truth. I can't even comprehend some of the moves that those girls are doing in their matches. It's unbelievable. It's like we were saying, definitely fun to watch. I definitely recommend going and checking out a match if you get the chance. But that'll pretty much do it for the recap and sound of this MSU crazy athletics week. It's been so much fun to kind of watch and see the success that this school is having. And I thank you as much for joining with me, Luke. But I can't let you get out of here without commenting on that jersey. Like, what's going on?
So for those of you who don't know, I am from outside of Philly, town called Morrisville. Shout out to Morrisville and Yardley, Pennsylvania. My Eagles are going to the Super Bowl for the second time in 3 years to play against the Chiefs. This is surreal. Jalen Hurts, he's awesome. A.J. Brown, and then, of course, MVP, Saquon Barkley. He's the best free agent signing in probably the last 10 years since Peyton Manning to the Broncos.
Yeah, I mean, his impact's been undeniable. It's the reason they've won games, especially in the playoffs. He's going off for 2-3 touchdowns a game. It's no joke.
I mean, I was a little bit upset that they didn't trot him out in the last game of the year to try to break the record. But, seeing him in the playoffs just absolutely dominating in the snow against the Rams, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, just seeing how impactful he's been. Like last year, the Eagles had DeAndre Swift, and then the year before that, when we went to the Super Bowl, we had Miles Sanders. Those are good players, but they're not Saquon Barkley.
They're not difference makers like
They're not difference makers like him. There's not one thing he can't do as a running back. Obviously he can run, but he can block, he can pass block, he can catch passes. It's insane.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I give you credit for being able to support your guys like that, because having a team, having a player like that, you guys are obviously built well enough to win the Super Bowl, as we have seen. They'll be going on to take Kansas City in 2 weeks, or I guess a week and a half from now. But congrats to your Eagles. I mean, I'm a Jersey kid, but I'm still Lions to die, and I really don't have much else to counter you guys, the success that you guys are having. But I think it's definitely good for you, and definitely good for the city.
I've seen some trash talking Lions fans when I've worn my jersey out. I feel bad for you guys because since you guys have been a team, it's been a tough. It's been tough being a fan. So I'm happy, but at the same time, there's a little too much trash talking for a team that hasn't been to the Super Bowl. That's all I'm gonna say.
It was right in the heart, man.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, you guys are some of the best trash talkers that come out of an NFL fan base that there is. So I can't really get too mad. But
sometimes when you have a great season and you lose like this, it just makes you even more motivated next year. That's why I think Lions are probably gonna be. I think they're gonna be like that team next year. Unfortunately, they lost Ben Johnson and their Aaron Glenn. They're now the head coaches of the Jets and the Bears. But Dan Campbell, he's a special coach. Yeah. I would probably run through everybody like a brick wall. I would run into a volcano for that, man.
He is. So he's a leader of men like I've never seen before. Yeah. He will get you fired up for making your breakfast in the morning. He will literally get you through any scenario you got. But
Yeah.
I'm sure hoping that we bounce back.
It's like kind of like the New Year's resolutions type of thing. Everybody wants to like get in shape and stuff like that. I think he would be the one person where it's like he wakes me up at 5 o'clock in the morning to work out. Like I'll be like, I wouldn't be like, oh, give me 5 more minutes. Like, okay, I'm ready to go. Like, let's do this.
Yeah, it's like your dad yelling you to get on the school bus. Like, come on, let's go. Like we're gonna do this and we're gonna do it now. So that's
like, all right, let's do it.
Like, okay, I'm ready now to go to school more than I ever was. But I mean, that's the only reason I feel like not the only reason, but I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons why the Lions will be able to sustain success for a little bit is they've got a great motivator and a great head coach with that as well. But
there are some questions about Jared Goff. Is he that right guy? I think he is. I think it's just, unfortunately he had those mistakes. He had that fumble against the Commanders, and there's just a lot of stuff just didn't go his way.
Yeah, and I used the term difference maker for Saquon Barkley just a little bit ago in this segment, and I think that Jared Goff is a great QB. I think he's borderline an elite QB, but I don't think he's a difference maker.
I don't like putting players into a 1 through 10 scale. Like I usually do it by like tiers. The top tier is just Patrick Mahomes by himself, and then
Agreed.
Below is Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. I would probably put Jared Goff like in that third tier. Probably with guys like Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels,
Definitely.
C.J. Stroud, Justin Herbert, guys like that. Like they're not total difference makers, but you'll definitely win a ton of games.
They will keep you in them for that matter as well, especially if there's not a great team around them. But I mean, you only got to see. Jared Goff's been to the big game once. Obviously, didn't get it done. Put up a stinker on offense in that game, but. We haven't seen, I think, as great of a team surrounded by him as we have with this 2024 going into 2025 Lions team, but only time will tell. I think the window's kind of just cracking open a little bit, but obviously you guys, as the Eagles, have had your window open for plenty of time now, going to 3 Super Bowls in the last 10 years. Kind of have to see how that one works out in 2 weeks, but definitely be rooting for you guys as a Jersey kid. And I think that's the best case scenario for the city and for that area, but that'll just about do it here today on the Sports Roundtable podcast. Thank you so much, Luke, for joining me. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, and it's been so much fun. Hopefully that MSU will continue to sustain the success that they have been over the last week or so. But we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Hopefully we'll have a better week in sports next week, and we'll catch you later.
See ya.